tsunami watch has been issued for the Washington coastline following a massive magnitude 8.7 earthquake off Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula this afternoon. It struck at 4:25 p.m. our time. The U.S. Geological Survey says a tsunami watch is issued when a tsunami may later impact that watch area.
Rocky Beach, exactly. So my foot here is just about at where sea level is now. The tide is coming in. I'm almost 6 feet tall. So picture this much more water on top of what's already here. Most of these areas are industrial, port areas where people are more likely to work than live. But even where there is more shipping containers stacked or gravel piled high, that could affect how deep the water gets.
We begin with breaking news. The U.S. West Coast, including our local counties, is under an unusual tsunami watch following a massive earthquake in Russia.
When experts warn about the possibility of a tsunami striking the Puget Sound region, it's not some hypothetical nightmare cooked up by thrill seekers or disaster movie directors. It's a very real concern based on hard science, and recent events overseas have made it all the more pressing.
Where the tsunami alerts are. Japan's meteorological agency just upgraded their tsunami warning to an alert level. Japan could see waves of up to 3 meters across the Pacific coast. So far, no damage has been reported. There's also a tsunami warning for the entire state of Hawaii tonight. The earliest estimated time of arrival is 10:17 tonight our time.
Earlier this year, an 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, sending waves surging and rattling communities thousands of miles away. Washington State was far enough to avoid any damage, but experts quickly noted an uncomfortable truth. That kind of earthquake, that magnitude, is exactly what the Pacific Northwest could face. When you lay the map side by side, the Cascadia subduction zone, the enormous fault line that runs just offshore from Northern California through Oregon and Washington to British Columbia, is a mirror image of the fault that shook Russia. It's the same type of tectonic boundary, the same potential to produce a monster quake, and the same ability to generate a wall of water capable of erasing entire coastal towns. And if it happens here, the difference is stark. Instead of hours of warning like with Russia, we'd have minutes. Dr. Harold Tobin, the director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, did not mince words when he spoke to Fox 13's Good Day Seattle after the Russian event. He explained that the Cascadia fault can easily generate a quake on the same scale, and that the tsunami waves could be catastrophic. It's also a subduction zone. It's the same kind of earthquake that the Cascadia could be. 8.8. It could very easily be the kind of scale we're at, and the nearby coast was affected by up to something like 25 or 30 feet high tsunami surges, which were very damaging in Kamchatka, Russia. He said in Washington the consequences would be immediate. The tsunami arrival time after the earthquake at the coastline is only a matter of, depending on where you are, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes or so. Just a very short period of time for people to actually evacuate from the hazard zone. 10 to 30 minutes. Think about that. That's less than the time it takes to get your kids dressed for school or to brew a pot of coffee. It's barely enough time to comprehend what's happening, let alone execute a flawless evacuation plan. And here's the reality check. Much of Washington's coastline is not built for this kind of sprint to safety. There are remote areas with few roads, communities on flat, low-lying land, and towns where the nearest high ground is miles away. Add to that the chaos of an earthquake, the shaking, the downed power lines, the collapsed bridges, and you begin to see why experts are uneasy. Western Washington has made strides in emergency planning. There are tsunami sirens, phone alerts, and apps like Shake Alert designed to give a few seconds notice before the shaking starts. But none of these systems are magic. Tobin was candid about the state of readiness.
By Harold Tobin from the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. Harold, thanks so much for joining us tonight, especially with such short notice. I want to ask you this first. Should there really be any cause for real concern at this point along our coastline?
Along our coastline, I would say people should be cautious and stay aware, but the cause for concern is not large. I don't think people should panic. A tsunami watch is a lower level of alert than a warning or a tsunami threat message.
The 2-foot tall, 3-foot tall tsunami waves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right, a 2-foot wave doesn't sound like much of anything, does it? But imagine instead the tide rising by 2 feet in the span of 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. It would be a rush of water coming in. A tsunami wave is not a short wave that just breaks. It's a very, very long train of water that's coming in at that higher water level. And as it comes into shallow water, it slows down and piles up. It builds up to a higher level. So even a small tsunami in the open ocean can turn into a dangerous one at the coastline.
Well, unfortunately, we absolutely don't have all the infrastructure in place. He admitted there are many regions where actually evacuating would be really challenging. You can imagine the immediate gridlock and bottlenecks in some places. There are parts of our coastal communities where evacuation to higher ground really isn't possible. We need those, what are called vertical evacuation structures, fortified buildings, or even special purpose towers that people can go up instead of away in order to get away from the tsunami. We're just beginning to be able to have that equipment and infrastructure here in Washington state, and we have a long way to go, unfortunately. Vertical evacuation structures sound like something from science fiction, but they are common in countries that live with tsunami risk, such as Japan. They're tall, reinforced towers, platforms, or buildings designed to withstand powerful waves, giving people an alternative when running inland isn't an option. Washington has started to explore them, but progress has been slow, partly because of cost, partly because of politics, and partly because it's hard for people to picture a disaster that hasn't happened yet in their lifetime. In the meantime, Tobin and other experts hammer home a simple message. Your first and best warning is the shaking itself. If you are on the coast and you feel strong shaking, do not wait for an alert. Do not finish your meal and do not collect belongings. Move. Get to high ground. But Cascadia isn't the only worry, and this is where things get even more sobering. Hidden beneath the population centers of the Puget Sound are faults that don't get nearly enough attention. The Seattle Fault and its cousins, like the Tacoma Fault, lie quietly under neighborhoods, highways, and businesses. They don't rupture often. The last known Seattle Fault quake was about 1,100 years ago, but when they do, they can be brutal. Unlike the offshore Cascadia subduction zone, these faults are shallow and right under our feet. A rupture could bring shaking so strong that unreinforced buildings crumble, infrastructure snaps, and entire neighborhoods are jolted violently. And because the Puget Sound is essentially a flooded valley with narrow bays, a Seattle Fault quake could trigger a localized tsunami inside the sound. This wouldn't be a towering ocean wave racing across the Pacific. It would be a sudden surge of water sloshing violently through places like Elliott Bay, the industrial waterfront, and low-lying neighborhoods. The damage could be devastating, and the warning time even shorter, measured in minutes, not tens of minutes. Tobin explained it clearly. Here in Seattle and in the population centers in Puget Sound, the faults like the Seattle Fault and there's another called the Tacoma Fault have less frequent earthquakes, but they really are sort of worst case event scenario. The shaking will be very strong for a Seattle Fault earthquake, and it could potentially produce a localized tsunami inside the sound, which would have really damaging effects along the shoreline. Fortunately, those events seem to be quite rare. The last one was apparently more than 1,000 years ago, but there's the possibility of a future Seattle Fault event, and that's another thing we need to prepare for. So what would you do if you were downtown, near the water, and the Seattle Fault ruptured? The advice is stark and simple. Ride out the shaking, then get up and away. Tobin stressed that the first priority is survival during the quake itself.
What it means is get to, whatever you can, 30 feet above the waterline. It doesn't mean the whole city has to go to the top of the hill. Fortunately, we have a lot of hills. We have a lot of topography in Seattle. We can get to higher ground, but 30 feet above sea level, 100 feet above sea level is a reasonable, truly safe distance, and for many of us, that's only a few blocks inland away from the water's edge.
First of all, number one, drop, cover, and hold on. The shaking will be strong, and we want people to make themselves safe during the actual earthquake shaking. He said, once the ground stops moving, the clock starts ticking. In a scenario like that, then the tsunami would actually arrive very quickly because, of course, Elliott Bay and the Sound is a pretty enclosed small area. What it means is get to whatever you can 30 feet above the waterline. It doesn't mean the whole city has to go to the top of the hill. Fortunately, we have a lot of hills, we have a lot of topography in Seattle, we can get to higher ground. But 30 feet above sea level, 100 feet above the sea level is a reasonable, truly safe distance. And for many of us, that's only a few blocks inland, away from the water's edge. This point is crucial. Unlike a Pacific-wide tsunami, a sound tsunami won't race across thousands of miles, but its speed in a confined basin means you can't wait around. The The water will move fast, and the shaking will have damaged or blocked some routes. But Seattle's geography is actually a blessing here. The city's hills, ridges, and stair-step neighborhoods offer many places to climb within minutes, even seconds, if you know where they are. That's the heart of the issue: awareness. Emergency managers can build sirens, apps, and even towers, but the single most effective lifesaver is a population that knows what to do without thinking. Imagine this: you're having lunch on the waterfront when the shaking starts. You drop, cover, and hold on. When it stops, you grab your friends, your kids, and you head uphill. Now, not later. You don't wait for an official voice or a push notification. You've practiced this in your mind. You know the nearest street that climbs, the building that's taller, the hill that's safe. The Russian earthquake was a distant event, but it highlighted the gap between perception and preparedness in Washington. The tsunami advisory for the state's coast was eventually canceled, but the mere fact that phones buzzed and alerts were issued reminded people that we live on a restless margin of the earth. We love the mountains, the sound, the ocean views, but they exist because of the same tectonic forces that threaten them. The Pacific Northwest is young, geologically speaking. Its peaks are rising, its coasts are being reshaped, and its faults are storing energy. That energy will be released someday, whether it's Cascadia rumbling offshore, sending waves crashing into Long Beach and ocean shores, or the Seattle Fault cracking beneath our feet, jolting Elliott Bay and sloshing water into downtown. The question isn't if, but when. Experts like Tobin don't say these things to frighten people. They say them because knowledge saves lives. Vertical evacuation towers won't build themselves, and emergency routes won't mean much if nobody knows them. Awareness, drills, and investment are the keys. And as technology improves, apps, shake alert warnings, AI-driven modeling, we can get better at buying precious seconds. But nothing replaces instinct. If you feel shaking at the coast, move. If you're near the waterfront and the city shakes, climb. The ocean doesn't wait, and water always wins against hesitation. This is the reality Washington has to accept. The beauty of the Puget Sound comes with a price. It is a bowl that can slosh, a shoreline that can flood, and a region whose people must stay agile. Whether it's a monster quake far offshore or a rare but deadly rupture under our feet, the risks are baked into the landscape. The Russia quake showed us the scale of power these events have. Now, it's up to us to imagine it here, to prepare, to act fast when the ground rolls and the sirens wail, because in that moment, minutes mean lives.